in the life sciences. I used to say in the 90s, during the time that I was Treasury Secretary, and it surprises me a bit that it's still true, that the United States was the only country in the world where you could raise your first $100 million before you bought your first necktie. And that is essentially still the case. And that is a profound competitive advantage for the United States. And there is one other great advantage the United States has, and that is the demographic. Uniquely in the industrialized world, we have a rate of fertility that exceeds replacement and provides for an aging population. And with all our problems in this area, we stand out relative to Europe and Japan in our ability to attract and assimilate immigrants to our very great benefit. All of these things leave me with no sense of complacency. Indeed, that would be what would alarm me most. But with a sense that there is the prospect that the next years can be good ones for the United States. It is more difficult to be serene in looking at the situation in Europe. My old teacher, Rudy Dornbush, used to say that in economics and finance, things take longer to happen than you think they will, and then they happen faster than you thought they could. It's helpful in many parts of life, but it is, I think, helpful in thinking about the challenges that the European monetary system has faced. Many expected when that system was introduced that a system of many countries with many governments and one money would prove complex to operate. They reasoned that there were two standard models of adjustment in the world. One was the kind of model that exists between Michigan and Texas. When times are good in Texas and they're tough in Michigan, the federal government taxes Texas a lot more, taxes Michigan a lot less. That tends to balance things, and people move from Michigan to Texas, and that further balances things. And the federal government stands behind the banks in Michigan using money that they get in part from Texas. And all of that stabilizes things. That's one model. A second model is the model that exists between Michigan and Ontario, Canada. There are no large tax transfers. There's no common standing behind banks. Migration is very limited. But when times are tough in Ontario, and they're good in the north central region of the United States, the Canadian dollar depreciates, and a depreciated Canadian dollar makes everything Canada produces cheaper, which raises the demand and puts people back to work. The challenge in Europe is that the common money removes both of those mechanisms. You do not have the cushions that exist within the United States, and you do not have the exchange rate flexibility that exists between the United States and Canada. The result is a system that can and has proven to be highly brittle. The consequence of doubts about creditworthiness and limited transfers has been an enormous procyclicality of demand in the most troubled countries. Where demand is short, austerity has been most severe, leading to further cutbacks in GDP, leading to limited, if any, progress in bringing down debt ratios. And so it is it is possible to look at Europe, and indeed I think right to look at Europe with admiration for the goal of unity. It is right to look at Europe with appreciation for what, in particular, Mario Draghi has been able to accomplish. Never before have so few words and even less actions been so profoundly salutary in a financial situation, as his commitment late last summer to do whatever was necessary, and his follow-on assertion that that could be a lot, and he was prepared to do a lot. It is a remarkable achievement to have maintained stability this long. But the avoidance of catastrophe should not be confused with the reality of progress. And economic prospects for Europe appear to be very poor looking forward several years. Much of that is a consequence of the macroeconomic malaise associated with the fixed exchange rates, many of which are non-competitive, and the pro-cyclical austerity in a time of downturn. But those concerns are magnified by structural issues, continuing rigid labor markets and lack of flexibility to start businesses, to make changes in labor arrangements, to make necessary adjustments, and an underlying demographic dynamic where governments are very, very heavily invested in pension systems, and the share of the population that is past retirement age is steadily increasing. So I find it difficult to be optimistic about the prospects of European growth, even if my judgment is that it is most likely that at the end of the day, but perhaps only at the last moment, an ultimate concern for European Union will trump concerns about financial virtue and lead to the Union's preservation. To be sure, policies based on disaster prevention, where action is only taken late in the day under pressure of disaster, do always run the risk of accident. What might one hope for? One might hope for a greater recognition than has been evident to date in Europe, that weakly capitalized financial systems lead to weak economies because of their inability and unwillingness to provide credit on a substantial scale, and systemic approaches to achieving capital adequacy in the banking system. One might hope for comprehensive efforts to bring down capital costs and borrowing costs, particularly in the most affected countries. And above all, one might hope for a recognition in North Central Europe that has not yet been present, that you cannot have export-led growth anywhere without importers and without those who are willing to import on a substantial scale. And as long as the German economic model is dependent on very substantial trade surpluses,